I think we need to remember that there are a number of, I guess, what you might say on the face of it are contradictions that we've seen right throughout this process of social distancing. For example, it remained the case that people could travel on planes, well into the lockdown period, because the argument went, I suppose, and the same you would say about schools and a number of other functions. The argument went that there was a deeper purpose to it. Some functions are fundamental and necessary, and so a risk judgment is made about whether those activities should be allowed or not. Things that are entirely discretionary, on the other hand, which is where sporting events and a number of other activities, came to a halt, were much more easily stopped. So I think, there's no doubt that the protests on the weekend have sharpened this argument because, we did see large numbers of people congregating in an area, many of them raising their voices and yelling, about a just cause, no doubt, but, engaging in activity that I guess many would say at least increases the risk of transmission of the infection. So that certainly sharpened the argument, and we do see this contradiction now, and that's going to be very, very difficult, I think, for the authorities to manage.
Do you think that, and you are right, and it did point to a just cause that people were protesting over the weekend. Do you see anything that can change when it comes to this space in the near future? I mean, also on the front page of the Australian today, there is a report that suggests that it's time to close the gaps in jails, which indicates that there's going to be a push to try and reduce Indigenous incarceration by anywhere around 20 to 30% within the next 10 years. So that's one of the issues that are being looked at the moment. Do you think from those protests over the weekend that this is, the trigger for, these things to actually happen?
Well, I think it's a fairly clear indication that there is a strong desire on the part of the community to see this issue resolved. It's an intractable issue. It's one that's been around for a long time. It's one that there have been many words, well-intentioned words spoken and written over a long period of time. And yet, really, in the last 20 years, we've actually seen about a 50%, in fact, slightly more than 50% increase in the rate of Indigenous incarceration. Even though the statistics also show that the rate of fatalities in incarceration has gone down, but the overall rate of incarceration of Indigenous Australians has gone up by more than 50% since 2000. So it's clearly a problem. It's a problem right through the justice system. It reflects the way the Aboriginal community is policed, how they interact with law enforcement, and then how they interact with the courts, and they're showing up in these prison populations. So it's really difficult when you think about reducing the rate by 10, 20 or 30% over the next decade. It should be achievable. It's not that, given the numbers we've just been talking about, it's not that ambitious, but it does represent a significant increase from the targets or the ambitions that we have in place at the moment.
Just a couple of other political issues at the moment, Mark. I mean, there was the big announcement yesterday that childcare, free childcare, is essentially ending in a couple of weeks' time. Labor will point to the fact, or is pointing to the fact, that the Prime Minister had promised that it would last up to 6 months, and it's come well short of that, even though there is going to be a transition payment that will be in place to kind of cushion the blow. But is that an idea or an example of how things are kind of, promises are built on shifting sands at the moment, given, the way that the economy is moving from week to week?
Yeah, look, I think the jury's still out as to what the sort of policy virtues are of the initial assistance and now it's winding back into this transition phase. But I would say, in defence of the government, that all of this emergency assistance had to be thought of very quickly and put into place very quickly. That's the nature of an emergency. And we do want to see a dynamic government. We do want to see the decision-making process relevant to the circumstances that we face. It's not set and forget. It's set and adjust. And we see an adjustment today with the instant asset write-off extension that is appropriate and presumably based. I noticed that you were asking Josh Frydenberg about whether that reflected lower business activity or lower take-up of the instant asset write-off as it was announced than the government had hoped for. The figures aren't out on that, Josh Frydenberg said, but clearly the government's looking to build confidence and make the economy as strong and robust as possible in these circumstances. And it's made a judgment in the childcare space that this assistance can now be wound back into this transition phase. Whether that's the right judgment or not, I guess I'm in less of a position, we're all in less of a position to conclusively judge, but dynamism in this environment, I think, is a good thing.
Yep.